Sometimes a single moment can destroy everything you thought you knew about a family. Imagine a home that millions watched every week, a family that claimed to be united by faith and love, suddenly ripped apart by a secret so shocking it left even the most loyal fans speechless. Hi friends, I'm Aliva, and welcome to TLC's Sister Wives Secret. If you're as stunned by the latest Sister Wives scandal as I am, make sure you subscribe and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one story you won't want to miss. For years, the Brown family stood as the face of polygamy in America. Their sprawling family tree, their complicated relationships, and their endless attempts to keep the peace under one roof made them reality TV legends. But behind the scenes, the pressure was always building. The cameras caught the smiles, the family dinners, the big moves from Utah to Las Vegas to Arizona, but they also caught the cracks: jealousy, heartbreak, and the constant struggle to keep everyone together. By the time the family settled in Flagstaff, the Browns were already walking on eggshells. Financial stress, public criticism, and the fallout from past betrayals had left everyone on edge. And in the middle of all this tension, something unthinkable happened, something that would change the Brown family forever. Kody's relationship with Aurora, Robyn's daughter, whom he had adopted and raised as his own, had always seemed loving, but distant. No one could have predicted that a single conversation would turn their world upside down. The shock of Kody's proposal to Aurora didn't just echo through the walls of their Arizona home. It detonated like a bomb, leaving everyone reeling. In the moments after Kody's words hung in the air, Aurora's world spun out of control. She was frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard from the man she'd always called Dad. Her hands shook as she locked herself in the bathroom, her mind racing with confusion, fear, and disbelief. For Aurora, this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a total collapse of the trust she'd built over years in a family that was already fragile. Robyn, Aurora's mother, was the first to learn what had happened. The text from her daughter was frantic, almost unreadable, but the message was clear. Kody had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Robyn's reaction was instant and fierce. She stormed through the house, her heart pounding, desperate to protect her daughter from further harm. The confrontation with Kody was raw and emotional. Robyn's voice shook with anger and heartbreak as she demanded answers. But Kody, standing in the kitchen with a glass of wine, seemed almost detached, insisting that his feelings were real and that Aurora was no longer a child. Robyn's pain was visible. Her trust in Kody shattered in an instant. She told him to leave, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. But the chaos didn't stay contained within those walls. News of the proposal spread quickly, first through whispered phone calls and then across social media. The Brown family, already used to living in the public eye, suddenly found themselves at the center of a storm they couldn't control. The other wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, were blindsided. Each of them had their own complicated history with Kody. But this was something none of them could have imagined. Christine, who had already left the marriage, was the first to speak out publicly. Her words were sharp and full of pain. She said this was exactly why she'd walked away. Kody's lack of boundaries, his disregard for the emotional safety of those around him. Janelle, always the protector, took to social media to express her heartbreak and her fear for her children's safety. She admitted she'd tried to shield her kids from the worst of the family drama, but nothing could have prepared her for this. Meri, who had weathered her own storms with Kody, was visibly shaken. She went live on Instagram, her voice trembling as she called Kody's actions a violation of every moral line, regardless of blood relation. The children, too, were caught in the crossfire. Aurora's siblings, both biological and adopted, struggled to make sense of what had happened. Some reached out to Aurora with messages of support, while others withdrew, unsure how to process the betrayal. The family group chats, once full of everyday updates and inside jokes, fell silent. The sense of safety that had once existed, however fragile, was gone. The Browns had always prided themselves on being different, on showing the world that their way of life was built on love and trust. Now that trust was broken, and the emotional toll was devastating. As the story spread beyond the family, the public response was swift and unforgiving. Fans who had followed the Browns for years were horrified. Social media exploded with outrage, hashtags calling for justice for Aurora, and demands for TLC to take action. The fallout from Kody's proposal didn't just stay within the Brown family or their inner circle. It erupted into a full-blown public scandal, the kind that reality TV rarely sees in real time. Almost overnight, the story was everywhere, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and every major entertainment news outlet. Fans who had once cheered for the Browns now flooded social media with disbelief and anger. Hashtags like #JusticeForAurora and #ProtectTheKids started trending, and comment sections filled with outrage. People who had never watched a single episode of Sister Wives were suddenly weighing in, shocked that something so disturbing could happen in a family that had always claimed to be about love and acceptance. The media circus was relentless. Paparazzi camped outside the family's Flagstaff home, hoping to catch a glimpse of Robyn or Aurora. Tabloids ran headline after headline, speculating about what would happen next. Talk shows debated the story, with experts on family dynamics and child psychology weighing in on the dangers of blurred boundaries in non-traditional families. Even former cast members and reality TV stars chimed in, some expressing support for Aurora and Robyn, others calling for accountability from TLC. The Browns, who had once controlled their own narrative through carefully edited episodes and social media posts, suddenly found themselves powerless as the world dissected their pain. TLC, the network that had built its brand on the Brown family's story, was forced to respond. At first, there was silence, a brief, tense pause as executives scrambled to figure out their next move. But as the backlash grew louder, TLC released a statement acknowledging the disturbing allegations and announcing an immediate halt to all filming. Within days, the network made it official. Sister Wives was canceled after nearly 2 decades on the air. The announcement sent shockwaves through the fan base. For many, it felt like the end of an era. For others, it was a necessary step to protect the family and send a message about accountability. But the impact went far beyond reality TV. The Browns' private pain had become a national conversation about trust, boundaries, and emotional safety, especially for adopted children and those in complex family structures. Experts appeared on news panels discussing the warning signs of emotional manipulation and the importance of clear parental roles. Survivors of similar experiences began sharing their own stories online, inspired by Aurora's courage. The scandal forced viewers to confront uncomfortable questions about what happens when the lines between parent and child are crossed, and what responsibility networks have to protect the people whose lives they broadcast. The Brown story was no longer just entertainment. It was a wake-up call, and the world was watching. In the weeks after the scandal broke, Aurora's world shrank to the 4 walls of her bedroom. The outside noise was deafening. Reporters at the gate, social media in a frenzy, and the weight of her family's pain pressing down on her. For days, she barely spoke, barely ate, and barely slept. The trust she'd placed in Kody, the man who had raised her, was shattered. But even in her darkest moments, Aurora wasn't alone. Robyn, her mother, became her fiercest protector, sitting with her through panic attacks, holding her hand during sleepless nights, and reminding her that none of this was her fault. Therapy became a lifeline. Aurora started meeting with a trauma specialist, first over Zoom and then in person, slowly learning to untangle the confusion and guilt that Kody's actions had left behind. It wasn't easy. There were days when she questioned everything, her memories, her worth, even her place in the family. But with every session, she grew a little stronger. Her siblings, especially her younger brother Solomon, reached out with small gestures of love. A sandwich slipped under her door, a note that simply said, "I miss you." These moments reminded Aurora that she was still loved, still part of a family, even as everything else fell apart. Eventually, Aurora found her voice. She posted a raw, unfiltered video online, sharing her story in her own words. She spoke about the betrayal, the confusion, and the pain, but also about the importance of speaking up when someone in power crosses a line. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from other survivors, thanking her for her honesty and courage. Inspired by their stories, Aurora launched a podcast focused on emotional safety and healing in complex families. She became an advocate, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless or unheard. Her journey from trauma to advocacy sparked conversations about legal reform and inspired a movement for change, proving that even in the aftermath of betrayal, hope and strength can still grow. As the dust settled, Kody Brown found himself more alone than ever before. The man who once stood at the center of a sprawling family and a hit TV show was now isolated, cut off from the people he'd called his wives and children. Public opinion had turned sharply against him. Former fans, once fascinated by his leadership and charisma, now saw only the damage left in his wake. Kody's attempts to defend himself online fell flat, with every post met by a wave of criticism and disbelief. The reality of his actions and the pain they caused couldn't be spun or explained away. Legal consequences followed quickly. Robyn, determined to protect Aurora and her younger children, filed for a restraining order. The courts agreed, barring Kody from any contact with them. The family home, once meant to be a symbol of unity and hope, was lost to foreclosure, standing empty as a reminder of what had been destroyed. The other wives, Christine, Janelle, and Meri, closed ranks around their children, making it clear that Kody was no longer welcome in their lives. The end of Sister Wives marked more than just the cancellation of a TV show. It was the end of an era, a public reckoning with the dangers of unchecked power and blurred boundaries. But even in the midst of heartbreak, there was a sense of hope. Aurora's courage, Robyn's fierce protection, and the support of the other wives showed that healing was possible. The Brown story became a lesson about the importance of trust, the need for accountability, and the strength it takes to start over, even when everything falls apart.